Kalimera. Hello, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 13 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. Yes, we have actually brought you 13 episodes. We are truly moving the ball down the road here at Let's Start Healing in our first season. I just greeted you with Kalimera. That is good day, good morning, good afternoon in Greek. We do have a saying here at Let's Start Healing. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. And I think we're doing that. And even if it's baby steps, I think we're doing that. I love how we're able to bring you such a variety of guests. And before I introduce you to our guest today, I invite you to listen to all of our episodes at Apple Podcasts, also on our YouTube channel at Let's Start Healing Podcast. Follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. So our guest today is such a wonderful spirit. He's someone I have known for a long time. His name is Nadir Muwwakkil. And Nadir has this way of connecting with people. Well, first of all, he's such a kind soul. And he has a way of getting you to unlock things within yourself. He's going to talk to us about how we can get out of our own way for personal healing, and also how we can connect with other people. This is actually what he does for a living in corporate America. He's a corporate trainer, and he works with business leaders and helping them to connect with their staff. He unlocked something for me years ago around trust. And at the time, I was really not interested. I was not interested, and I was like, what are you talking about? But I was in a conversation at his home with he and his now wife, Jazz Jones, who was interviewed in our podcast episode 3. And I was talking to them, I think, about a past relationship or relationships in general and my perspective at that time on men. And I might have been a little jaded. And Nadir was across the room, and he said something to the effect of around trust to a comment that I had brought up, that maybe I'm having a problem trusting men because, or these boyfriends that I had in my past, because they didn't trust me. And I thought, and I said, what are you talking about? I am very trustworthy. You know, what do you mean? And so what he was getting to is that something that I definitely know is true today. And that is that I can't have love if I don't give love. I can't have trust if I don't give trust. It's become very true and significant along my spiritual path and journey. And so Nadir was the first person to spark that shift in my thought process around that. So let's meet him. Let's get started, and let's start healing. Welcome, Nadir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You know, I've told you I wanted you to be my first interview, but I
Really?
finally got you. I finally roped you in.
Well, I'm glad I'm here.
So, Nadir, would you share with us your spiritual path? How would you describe it?
Well, my dad was a Church of God in Christ pastor. And so I grew up in the church. I can't really say I got all the philosophy and the dogma, But what I did get was that my dad was a really good man, and he served people, and he was very sincere. And so I got a sense that there was something real there, even though the dogma part of it. So
You didn't connect with
I didn't.
You didn't connect with God.
I felt like I connected with God, but I didn't understand all the stuff that was being said about him. And so I have been on a search my entire life for that. And I studied a lot of different religions and tried to practice those faiths, and ultimately sort of got frustrated with all of that. And I sort of feel like what Gandhi said in that movie, where he says, you know, I am a Buddhist and I am a Muslim and I am a Christian. And, you know, I read something once that described the major religions as houses that were in a circle, and they all shared the same backyard. And you go through each of those doors and you go into the backyard and you connect with the spiritual oneness, and they're all in, it's all the same place, but from the outside they look completely different.
Wow.
So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's kind of true.
I think if, you know, Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, they wouldn't be arguing like people do today. They'd be working together, helping people. That's what I believe.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so where are you now, and how did you get to where you are now?
How did I get here? That's an interesting.
Who are you, and how did you come to be?
Well, I just, you know, my brother Leonard used to talk about good people. And he never really defined it, but good people are people, I think, who will, they won't hurt you. They would never do anything to, you know, create a problem for you. And if they could, they would be of assistance. They would try to help you. And so that has sort of always been my objective, to connect with people, to do right by people, to, you know, be helpful if I can. In fact, the Course in Miracles says, you know, talks about being truly helpful.
Right.
And that's kind of like a goal for me.
And so that, did there come a point where that was something you decided that you were going to be a person who wants to connect with other people? Because I see how you connect with other people. I know how I connect with you, and I see how when you meet someone, you really want to know them and know what they're interested in, and, you know, who they are.
Well, you know, we can find reasons to fight and disagree. That's easy. Let me just back up a little. I'm the 14th of 15 children, and I have 8 older brothers, and so I grow up in this big family, and all of us were raised in the same environment. We went to the same church. Some of us had the same teachers, and we are as different as night and day. And so even coming from the same background, we're all different. And so you can find reasons to fight, or you can look for reasons to connect. And so I look for reasons to connect. In fact, the work that I do, I teach leaders how to manage people. I teach people how to connect. And what you do is you look for things that you can align, and you use those to help you navigate the parts where you don't align. So that's kind of how I see it anyway.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rensselaer, New York, Albany, Schenectady area. It's called the Capital District. It's upstate New York, not New York City.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So do you remember your first awareness of the presence of God, your first experience of God?
Yeah, sort of. I was walking down the middle of the street. It was late one night, and, you know, I was staring up into the stars. And I just looked up and I had this feeling like I was everywhere all at the same time, like the sky, me, the trees around me, all of that stuff was just, and I didn't really think of it as God, but it was just, it was a profound, peaceful sort of a feeling. And I've reflected on that many times in my life, and I might have been 7 or 8 years old, something like that, just a little kid.
It's that oneness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, A Course in Miracles, my absolute favorite verse says, healing is when two souls recognize their oneness and become glad. And so that's my mission in life. That's why I teach leadership, because if you can teach people to, hiring smart and talented people is easy, but getting smart and talented people to work together, given all of the differences in their background, you look for what works. You can find stuff that you can argue about. You can find things to disagree about. You can find things you don't like about another person. And if you do that, you increasingly find it harder and harder to work with them. But if you look at where you align, then you take those things and you can leverage them in order to make those connections. It is work, but it's worth it.
There's something about you that I don't know if you can see it to help me find out what that thing is, but I feel like there's something about you that has a person, it allows a person to be willing. Because in the workplace, I wanted to ask, as you were just talking, well, how do you get a person to be on board? And I know you're saying you find maybe something in common, but there's something, I feel like you have an extra something that helps a person say, I'm willing to. Do you recognize that in you?
I don't know if I recognize it in me, but what I know, Woodrow Wilson sort of articulated my life's philosophy, which is, he said, let me see if I get this right. I use not only the brain that I have, but all that I can borrow. And so
I like that.
If I think about that, no matter how good I am or how powerful I am or how effective I am, if I borrow one piece of insight from every person that I interact with, that makes me more valuable. It gives me a better ability to connect with more people. And so what I try to teach is that it actually represents your best interest to connect as effectively as you can with all of the people that you, quote unquote, have to deal with.
Right.
Meeting people and connecting with them is an opportunity, and it expands your ability to be successful and do what you want to do in life.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how you introduced me to, if you don't mind talking about the Sedona Method very briefly. Do you mind talking about that for a second?
Sure. The Sedona Method is, it's basic. I mean, it's deeper than this, but the simple thing is it's just a couple of questions, right? Could I let this go? Now, that's interesting. Is it possible for me to let go of maybe my judgment of you or my irritation with you? The next question is, would I let it go if I could?
Right.
Now, that's interesting because sometimes I don't want to let it go, And then the last question is when? Now, my son-in-law is the calmest person I have ever met. He just doesn't get ruffled about anything. He sort of takes a deep breath and relaxes and and then he says what his opinion is. I've literally never seen him upset or angry. Now, maybe he does get that way, but I haven't seen it. So I look at him and I say, man, I would like to be more like that.
Right.
And so by having a role model, if you will, and then the Sedona Method kind of gives you a way to get there, because if you stop and think about it, let me just back up and tell you a different story. I was talking to a friend of my son's, and he was talking about a friend of his who was having what he called baby mama drama. In other words, his ex was using the child as a challenge and wouldn't let him see him and stuff like that. And so I asked him, I said, well, how does he treat her? And he said, oh, she ain't all that. And he started describing. And I said, well, he may not like his boss either, but he doesn't treat his boss disrespectfully.
Exactly.
So we have an ability to check those emotions that come up, but the challenge is, am I motivated to do it?
Right.
And so could I let it go? Well, yeah, because if I thought about my mom, there's no way I would express the negativity that sometimes comes out of my mouth. So we could let it go.
Right.
Would I? That's about the intention part of it. And so just asking the questions, sometimes you may say no, but just the awareness in your system, it allows you to kind of quiet yourself down.
It does. And it seems like it wouldn't, I mean, if you just look at it at face value, if you just look at it at face value, oh, that's not going to do anything. But it really does. It really does. And the way that I look at it is when it's, could I let this go? Would I let this go? Right? And so when I say, would I let this go? Then I say to myself, am I willing to let this go? And that's the thing. It releases something. If I'm even just a little bit willing, it releases something.
Yes.
And there's a video on YouTube that after you introduced me to it, I went to this video from like the 1990s, 1998, and he was doing, what's his name?
Hale Dwoskin.
Hale Dwoskin.
Yes.
So he was doing a meditation basically, and I literally wrote down everything he said, which I can't stand doing that. It just takes so long. But I wrote down everything he said so that I could use it. And at the time, I was going through some heartache, and I didn't want to face these things because he would ask questions like, did this person try to control you or challenge you in any way? Or did you try to control or challenge this person in any way? It was, and there's a resistance to answering it honestly, but you're just dealing with yourself. So why not just be honest? And it helped me to heal so much faster. It really, really did. And by the end of this meditation, so say in the beginning of it, I'm feeling a little funky, right? About this person, about myself. And then by the end of me reading and meditating and focusing on these words, he's in a place of love, with his words. And I feel differently inside.
Yes.
So.
And it's very powerful. Even just a little bit of movement means that I can shift things. I remember, and it was a speech that I heard many, many years ago, and the person described someone coming up behind you and sticking a gun in your back, and what happens in your nervous system when that happens. And then you turn around and you figure out it's only the person's finger. Right?
Yeah.
So our system
Yeah.
does what it's trained to do,
Right.
and it's based on how you perceive things. So what you recognize is you have a lot more control over how you process things. It takes
It
practice,
does.
but that's if you want the peace, which I do,
Right.
then it's worth it to practice things that put you in that peaceful state.
And you meditate regularly,
Yes.
right? How often do you meditate during the course of a day?
I try to meditate twice a day. I don't always, but typically very first thing in the morning before I get involved in anything else. I meditate, and then I also have guided meditation tapes that I use at different times, and so my strategies are different. I learned transcendental meditation probably 30 or 40 years ago, and I do that sometimes, but basically it's, can I quiet my mind? And if you can quiet your mind in the middle of turmoil, you respond better.
Right.
In fact,
right.
one of the things that I say in my leadership training is you can react based on your conditioning, or you can respond based on what represents your best interest. And typically, my background, my thoughts, I may get agitated over something, but if I act agitated with my wife, it usually doesn't turn out well. It just doesn't.
Right,
It's
right,
not
right.
in my best interest. And so if I can bring even a little bit of that calm when I'm irritated, it allows the situation to be better. And it doesn't matter if it's my wife or if it's my business partner or if it's somebody that I'm working with or someone I'm trying to teach something to. The better I can think about how we connect and bring that peacefulness to it, the better the results turn out. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, so let's rewind for 1 second. I wanted
Sure.
you to share about your name. And you changed your name to Nadir.
Yes.
And so tell us about your first and last name and how you came to change it.
So, eighth grade social studies, I think it was, that I learned that black people, it might have been earlier than that, but black people got their name from slavery. So whoever Mr. Singleton was that owned the Singleton plantation,
Right.
that's where my name came from. And so, and there's also something in the Bible that says a good name is better than gold. And so I put those two ideas together and I said, one day I'm going to change my name. And I was strolling through a book with African and Arabic names in it, and it had the name on one side and the meanings on the other side. So I went down the meaning side first and found the meanings that I wanted, and I selected those names. So Nadir means unique or rare, and I've always been a little weird, so I think that fit. Muwwakkil means one who will not betray your trust. And that was, I felt like that's who I was, although I didn't have confidence in it, but I knew that's what I wanted to be about. And my middle name didn't fit at all at the time I selected it, which is Salim, and that means one who is not easily upset. And I actually used to...
Get upset easily?
Yeah, I got upset easily.
Wow.
And I got in a fight one day, and I felt like the person deserved it. They were picking on someone that was a friend of mine, but I went from 0 to punching the person in the face so quickly that it scared me. And so I didn't want myself hijacked by my emotions.
Right.
And so the Sedona Method, a lot of other things, I look for ways to bring that. And now I'm like that. I'm not easily upset at all.
Yeah. And so I'm so fascinated, one, because I'm aware that you have to make a decision to get to that place. So I just really admire that. And then also am inspired by the fact that it works, obviously. once you make a decision like that.
Yeah.
You get there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, joining a gym doesn't get you in shape, but going and doing the workouts. And so finding strategies and role models, I mean, that's what I do. If I see characteristics that someone else displays that I'd like, how do I learn to do that? And what's interesting is we learn to be who we are. We don't come here
Right.
angry, upset, or whatever. That gets, all of that is learned by our environment. And so I can take over the direction of my learning rather than just allowing how I happen to grow up to dictate how I am. And so,
But also, I'm fascinated that you weren't attached to your birth name, because most of us are attached to our names. I mean, other people change their names, but you weren't attached to it, right? Or am I wrong?
well, I not attached to it. You're right, because I obviously let it go, which, interestingly enough, people ask me, how did your family react? And I remember the first time I told my dad that I think you should use my new name. And my dad said, to tell you the truth, Ronnie, I don't care too much for that new name. And I explained to him how I selected it and what it meant. And he said, well, you've always been level-headed, Nadir. And so from there forward, it was fine.
That's
So,
really sweet.
yeah.
Wow. Well, so you're married to Jazz Jones.
Yes.
Who was a guest on an earlier episode of
Yes.
Let's Start Healing. And I wanted you to talk about your vows, if you remember when you got married, which I should have asked her, but they were just so unique and wonderful. So would you share?
Well, the most powerful part that I remember about our vows is sort of our mantra, which is, I do me, you do you, and we do we. Right? So I have no desire to try to control or make Jazz into something other than what she chooses for her life. And she does the same for me. And then we get together and live our lives together.
Right.
Now, it's not easy. I mean, we grow up with, philosophies about how relationships are supposed to go and all of that stuff, which is not helpful in some cases. And her stuff is different than my stuff. And so we have to figure out, number one, how to communicate together, how to listen to each other
Right.
and understand where each other are coming from. And so we do that well. Now, it may look on the outside like we've got this ideal relationship. What we do well is we own our own stuff.
Right.
I take responsibility for, she didn't make me feel this way. I feel this way. And it's because of how I'm processing it. In fact, could I let it go? Would I let it go? When?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you stop and you ask yourself, if I fight, how's that going to work out? Not real well. I mean, I'd rather have a nice weekend together than being in opposite corners. And so both of us bring that intention to it, and then we try to learn stuff that helps us with it. We've read several books together about communicating in a relationship and how to own your feelings. And so that's
something that you recommend if two people are meeting each other for the first time and they're interested in maybe having a romantic relationship and pursuing that. You think it's a really good idea to find a book that you connect with.
Yes.
That you can read together. A book about communication, or
Yes.
what should the book
Communication is it's the heart of it. Virginia Satir said, once a human being has arrived on this earth, communication is the largest single factor that determines, and I'm going to shorten it, their success. And so all of your relationships are about how well you can connect with another person. And if you can't connect well, or if you can't share what's going on with you and have the other person hear it and understand it, and they can't share what's going on with them and have you understand it, then the we part of the relationship winds up not working.
Right.
And you still have to have the ability to be your own self. That's probably the most powerful thing about the relationship I have with Jazz, is that I can be myself in our relationship without feeling bad about that. And I think she would say she feels the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I just want to say that what I really loved about your vows was that it was, I got from it, each of you were going to do the best you can each day.
Absolutely.
And, you can't ask for more than that.
Absolutely.
So you are working on a book.
Yeah.
Would you tell our listeners about it?
Sure. The title of my book is Who Could You Be If You Didn't Know Who You Were? And I mentioned earlier that I'm the 14th of 15 children. I have 8 older brothers. Several of my older brothers were much more brilliant than I could even think about being. And I noticed as a teenager that they weren't doing very much with their lives. And I wanted to know why. Why is it that great potential doesn't always equal accomplishment? And that question changed the whole trajectory of my life. It caused me to start looking for, because first I said, why aren't they succeeding? And then I asked a different question. How could they succeed despite the challenges that they faced? And interestingly enough, connecting is how to do that. If you learn to connect well, if you learn to learn well and borrow well, you can move into environments that your early life would not have prepared you for. And so, who could you be if you didn't know who you were, is about how to recognize the limitations and where you started and decide where you want to be and how to get there. And then by connecting well, by learning to learn in different environments, you can grow yourself into the kind of person you would choose to be.
So are you providing tools? Are you talking about your life experiences?
It's a little bit of all of that, which is interesting, sharing my life experiences, which you asked me to interview me. And I'm like, why do you want to interview me? In fact, you'll notice I talk more about other people than I do about myself. Because once I learn who they are, then I know a little more about how to connect with them. And most
it's
people,
a deflection.
Yeah, in a way it is, and it's a fascinating journey. You move into different environments, and you may have been afraid of it initially. Like when I first started doing workshops in corporate America, I was like, I haven't even done working. I'm teaching in Exxon and American Express and IBM and Intel. I'm teaching in environments like that. And I was like, me? Working there? But what you find is everybody brings, when you can teach people how to connect, that's something that's needed everywhere.
That's emotional intelligence.
Yes,
isn't
it
it
is.
I mean,
it is.
Because it's something, I said that because it's something that's not about, how great of a business person you are or how educated you are. It's about connecting through being a human being.
It's being willing to listen. I think it was Covey. In fact, Jazz was a Covey trainer. And when we met, she heard me give a speech where I quoted Stephen Covey, who said, "Seek first to understand before being understood."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's pretty powerful, because if you understand who the other person is,
Right.
now you know how to be understood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's an important process. And when more people do it, if you do it even only in your own network, think about who your most important relationships are.
Mm-hmm.
You may have a significant other. If you have a job, you have a boss, and you have other people that you have to work with to get that job done. You have friends and family and people in your life. And so if you seek to understand who they are and make valuable connections with them, then you enrich whatever it is that you do together.
Right.
You will be more effective in doing that, and you expand your world. That's how you become who you choose to be. And at the same time, the more people you do connect with, the more you can connect with, and it provides that healing impact on the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the reason that we fight is that we don't understand each other. Nations, religions, people. We don't understand that we could find common ground if we looked for it and if we chose to.
Right.
And so the heart of my system of success is the ability to connect, because if I borrow something from you, now I've expanded myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I borrow something from every one of my most important relationships, not only do I grow, but we do better what it is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find myself getting more promotions. I find myself getting more clients. I find myself connecting with more people in a way where they want to have something to do with me, and it expands my ability to succeed. And at the same time, I think it heals our world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think is missing, is the ability to understand each other and to figure positive ways to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's good.
So do you have a desire to be understood?
I do.
I ask that because I'm connecting with so much that you're talking about, so I'm thinking about myself. So I'm like, if I have this desire, I'm wondering if you. I also think you're very curious. I'm very curious too.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So you have a desire to be understood, and that feeds into what you're talking about.
Yeah, I never, I was a poor black kid, and I didn't see us as poor, even though we didn't have a lot. But I grew up not thinking I had a whole lot to offer. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot more people out there like that, who just based on where they grew up and how they grew up and the environment that they learned how to see themselves in, don't think they have very much to offer. Mm-hmm. Well, that's just not true.
Right.
That's where you start. But if you figure out how to connect with your world right where it is now, and then you expand that. The more you connect, the more you can connect.
So when I was going to ask you, what's the first step somebody could do? So you just said figure out where you are right now and then expand that. What can they do to expand?
Well, the first thing you want to do is understand how you've learned to see you. Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? What were your exposures? Here's an interesting question. If you grew up differently, would you be different? And you might say, well, that's a dumb question. Of course you would be different if you grew up differently. Well, how different could you be?
I don't know if I would be different. I don't really think so.
So, do you speak Chinese?
No.
Okay. So if you grew up in China, do you have any doubt that you would speak Chinese fluently?
I have no doubt.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying, excuse me, is that in terms of the spirit of who I am, I don't think if I grew up in China, I would still have the same spirit of who I am.
Okay. And so I didn't say your spirit necessarily would be different,
Okay.
although you might have a deeper understanding of spirit, or you might have less of an
I
understanding
might
of
be I
spirit.
might be shaped differently,
Yeah,
is what you're saying, by my life experiences.
exactly.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
your life experiences determine how you interact with the world,
Mm-hmm.
determine what you think is right, what you think is wrong. And if, strangely enough, I thought about this. I read Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal,
Mm-hmm.
many, many years ago because I thought I was going to make my money in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Trump, when he was at the age I was at the time, and I'm about to buy my first property and I'm scared to death. I mean, I was petrified. I bought a fourplex. I lived in one of the units with my family and rented out the other three. And when I was buying that the night before, I couldn't even sleep. I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
You were scared of it. What?
I didn't know what would happen. It was my first major purchase. What if I lost everything?
Mm-hmm.
At the same age that I was then, Donald Trump owned multi-millions of dollars worth of real estate. And so the question that I asked myself is, see, Donald Trump's dad was a real estate developer.
Right.
I said, if I had grown up in the same house Donald Trump grew up in, would I be afraid? I probably
Right.
wouldn't.
Right.
So it's a matter of exposures.
Mm-hmm.
My exposures teach me who I am. And when you shift your exposures and you change your exposures, you change how you operate and you change the results that you get.
Right. Right. Because you understand that you're really not that different.
Yes,
It's just a matter of the life experiences.
exactly.
Okay. So, do you talk to God directly?
Yes. I, you know, I think when you ask good questions and you listen, that's sort of my way of talking to God. I, again, I mentioned earlier that like the religious part, I try to push that to the side. In fact, I love the Dalai Lama because I read in his books that what he tries to do is he tries to he uses science to explain things that reach the same conclusions as his faith does because he doesn't want his faith to get in the way.
Right.
And I think that people have used religion in ways, or their misunderstanding of religion has created all these conflicts, whereas all of them have the same backyard.
Right.
And so I'm hesitant to talk as much about God because I think people get turned off because they're like, well, which brand of God are you talking about? Well, there's only one, I think. And I think it's the substrate that we all connect to. And so, in a sense, if you get quiet enough, I think you connect with God. And if you can shut out the chatter that makes us think we can't be together, you find that unity that is among us. So, yes, I do talk to God all the time.
Well, to your point about different religions, that's sort of one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast and talk to people of all different faiths, because I think that the truth of every faith, the true purity of every faith is all the same. I think it's all about the love of God. So I don't even know why there are distinctions, because I think that there's, and I hope I don't offend anyone in saying that, but I just think it's all the same. It's all about God's love. Like if I call my God God and you call your God Allah, I think that our gods still are all about love.
Yes. Yes.
So the purity of it.
Yes, I agree.
So I want to ask you a few questions that I like to ask people at
Okay.
the towards the end of our time together. Um, well, when do you most feel the presence of God?
Um, when I'm quiet,
Mm-hmm.
when there's a peacefulness that you access when I'm not in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When I can shut out my fears and what I need to do and what's coming up and did I do that right. When I can quiet all of that and really go within,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I feel it most.
And what do you think God calls you to do for yourself and others?
Well, for the first time in my life, I feel like the work that I do matches my mission in life.
Mm-hmm.
Healing is when two souls recognize their oneness and become glad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get paid to teach people how to see the connection between them. And I feel like that it's not only makes for a more successful company,
Mm-hmm.
because when you can make a connection, you can teach people better.
Mm-hmm.
And managers can teach their employees to do stuff that will make the company successful. They can connect better with customers and they can connect better with each other. But the side effect is I had a guy in one of my workshops say, I got my boys back. He went home and applied it to his teenage sons, who he said I was just yelling at them and telling them what to do and telling them what they were doing wrong. And I went home and I figured out I needed to make a connection with them, and I
Mm-hmm.
did. And now our relationship is fabulous. And so the same skill set you can apply to all of your relationships. And as that improves, it makes our world a better place.
It
So,
does.
yeah.
It does. And I was going to ask you what kind of feedback you get from the people that you train sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, the job stuff is great, but
Mm-hmm.
I had a guy send me an email that said his wife wanted to erect a statue in my honor because of how he changed
Really?
in the yeah, and I get that kind of feedback
Mm-hmm.
consistently. That,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, that's what I try. Some people are more into their business results, and everybody, that's why they're in my workshops.
Mm-hmm.
But what may motivate the person is, how do I connect with this person in my life that's really special to me, and I don't know how to work with them. I
Right.
don't know how to deal with them. I'm having a problem with my wife or my husband or my child. And so you say it's the same skill set.
It
You
is.
learn to connect with all of them.
It's so funny because the corporate world, I was just thinking as you were talking, my perception of the corporate world when I was really in an office every day, I was just baffled because I felt that it's like we take something off when we walk into this building. And I just don't get it. I never got that. I never understood what that is. Like something shuts off where we're not who we are out there, you know, in the real, when we're out in our regular everyday lives.
And there are it's interesting because that's the recognizing, my family were huggers. We hugged
I'm a hugger
everybody.
too.
People came through our door, come on in, get a couple hugs on the way in, grab a plate, have something to eat. I mean, everybody was welcomed in our home. And so I grew up hugging people. Well,
I know
you know
exactly what you
what?
mean.
It doesn't work with everybody.
No.
There are some people who don't touch me. I like you, but don't. And so it's recognizing what part of me I can share with you for us to have that connection. Because there's some parts of my background that will bother you. So once we learn what those are, we can kind of push those to the side and focus on the ways that we do connect. And so the more I learn how to connect with the people that are in my world and what parts of me I can use to help us make that connection, that's when you start increasing your levels of success. I don't want to talk to this customer about something that's going to piss them off. I want to talk to them about something that's going to connect me to them and make them want to do business with me. With my boss, I want to talk to him in a way that he gets what I'm saying and it doesn't create problems. And so you have to learn who that person is. You have to seek to understand who they are before you try to be understood.
I have to say, I'm thinking so many things as you're talking. One is I had two bosses in the same office one time. And so one of them, he came in, he was a new boss.
Right.
Okay. And he was a micromanager, whereas my boss, who was also his boss, was a macro guy.
Right.
So here comes this guy that I'm working closely with, and he's a micro guy, and it's annoying me. But he went to some kind of training that was about communication. And it was only like maybe a day or two, and he came back, and he was a totally different person. Our relationship shifted to where, I mean, this was years ago, and I still adore this man. I just was fascinated. I was just like, I just adore him.
You know, what's interesting is that micromanaging style that you disliked, someone two desks over from you would really appreciate that and maybe needed it, right? And so the challenge when you're managing a bunch of people is you're not managing you. And so it's like a combination lock or a password. You got to have the right kind of way of understanding who you're dealing with so you know what strategy works. Obviously, he shifted to a strategy that worked for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if you're trying to communicate with someone who doesn't, you can't figure out how to, pardon me, to connect with them? Like it doesn't work, like the strategy that you're using. Like they don't seem to be able to bend in their perception of you. Or they seem to keep you at a distance, say in the workplace, but you want to have sort of a better camaraderie with them.
Well, the challenge is are you saying you want to hug them and they're not a hugger?
Not literally, but kind of.
Yeah. And so the challenge is recognizing that you can't have the same kind of relationship with everyone. You know, with some of them, you're judging it from your perspective, but from their perspective, it may seem like a really good relationship. You know, I'm the 14th of 15 children, and I worked with a guy that was an only child. And he said to me once, he said, "Nadir, you get a little bit too close to me when you talk to me. I'm used to having my own space."
Right.
And so what I do is I make the adjustment so that they are comfortable working with me wherever they are. And then we get better results together.
Right.
And so I allow myself to do the flexing if I can, and then maybe I can, after they really feel heard and understood, I may be able to show them a little more of what I prefer and see if they're interested.
Right.
But I got to understand them first.
Right. Okay, so moving on to our next question. Tell me about a time when you had a miracle or a blessing that you knew. It was an experience you had, something that happened that you knew that was God. I had nothing to do with that happening.
I guess the clearest example was meeting Jazz. I was married twice. I had 3 long-term relationships that lasted about 37 years. I had decided I didn't know how to do this. I'm not good at it. It's not going to happen for me. Never getting married again. But I kept, studying relationships and thinking about it and, so I'm in Houston giving a speech. She's passing through Houston. A friend of hers invites her to come to my talk. We actually met going to plug parking meters and said hi to each other. I was the keynote speaker. We started talking. I bought her book. I mean, we were both in different places, but we came together, and it was
divine.
It's pretty amazing. 12 years later, we're still having a great time together. We are married. I didn't do it.
That was not you. God did that.
No, that was not me.
So would you say that you are a healer or a seeker or both?
Yes.
Yes to both?
Yes. I am always seeking to understand this connectedness between us better, and I feel like it's my role to help facilitate that. So both.
Well, so before we close, are there any books that you would recommend to our listeners on any subjects? And, maybe a line or two, if there is a book, a line or two about what that book is about.
So I'm about connecting. I read a book many years ago called How to Start a Conversation and Make Friends. It's a very, very simple book that talks about how to find what connects you with another person just by asking questions. Their subtitle of the book is How to Become a Great Conversationalist, but the reality is you're not really talking so much. You're mostly asking questions so that you understand where the connections are. It's a simple book. You can probably read it in an afternoon, and it will help you improve your relationships.
And mention the element. Tell folks about
the element, and that every young person and every person who is interested in helping a young person should read The Element. The element is defined as where your talent and your passion intersect. Some people love doing something, but they don't have real good talent for it. Some people are talented at things, but they don't like doing it. When you find the area where both of those come together, that's where you're going to have the highest likelihood of succeeding, because you love doing it and you're good at it. And I found my element. So that's
And who
what I
is the
do.
book by?
Robinson is his last name.
Oh gosh, it's on the top of my the last
Ken
name is
Robinson.
Ken Robinson.
Sir Ken Robinson, yeah.
Well, Nadir, thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, listen to all of our episodes on our podcast channel on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Let's start healing.